Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Bandian. I am the owner and coordinator of NORWAC, the Northwest Astrological Conference. And as we did last year, due to our current situation of the pandemic, we are going virtual. And so you can find us at norwac.net. So we have a schedule. We have all the speakers listed. You can do pre and post conference workshops. And the dates of the conference are May 27th through the 31st. So go on over to norwac.net and check it out. So right now I have my friend and colleague, Leisa Schaim, here to talk with me today. Let me introduce you to Leisa Schaim through what I know about her. She is a Denver-based astrologer with a particular interest in combining the best of modern and traditional astrology to illustrate and interpret stories of human experience. She provides the monthly electional charts for the Astrology Podcast and is the co-host of the Auspicious Elections Podcast. Leisa is a full-time consulting astrologer and a past presiding officer of the Association for Astrological Networking, otherwise known as AFAN. Welcome, Leisa.
Hi, Laura. Thanks for talking to me.
Where can people find more information about you directly?
Just my name, leisaschaim.com is where you'll find everything.
Perfect. So I think this is your second or third? Is it
I think third. I'd have to look. I think third. Third NORWAC.
Usually I have that ready and I'm thinking,
yes.
I think this is your third. Yeah.
I think it's third. Yeah.
And so you have two lectures scheduled for NORWAC. One's on Friday, the 28th, and the other is on Sunday, May 30th. So let's talk about the first one, When Love Comes Around. So what are you going to be doing around that, when love comes around? Are we looking at when we're meeting someone or?
Yeah, basically, it's a really common question that is posed to astrologers. When will I meet someone, right? And like love, work, health, money, those are the big topics that people ask about. So when love comes around, I'm going to be looking primarily as a foundation using the Hellenistic timing technique of zodiacal releasing. And so that is a Hellenistic timing technique first devised about 2,000 years ago, more recently recovered, very, very useful. I was introduced to it in 2008, and it's become very foundational in my practice and all my consultations. And so what this does, it can divide your life up into chapters like a book with respect to whatever topic you're looking at. And so you can use it actually to look at love life or relationships. And that's one of the topics you can use it for. And so I'm going to be looking at that and showing basically when are the most active and important periods where you would expect like this to be a pivotal time for someone for relationships, as well as the quality of the periods, whether it's subjectively experienced as more positive or more challenging with regard to relationships. So that's going to be the foundational piece I'm doing, but I'm also going to cross-reference it with some other timing techniques because you know how there's the so-called rule of three in astrology. Like if you see one thing that's pointing to a certain direction, you're like, maybe not, then you see two or you see three, you start seeing different indications pointing in the same direction. You're like, yes, this is going to happen. So, or very likely to happen anyway. I'm going to be introducing basically how I cross-reference for consultations when people are asking about relationships.
So we're talking basic transits. We're talking about cross-referencing maybe with progressions or some other type of technique.
Yeah, probably at least perfections, annual perfections, and eclipses are two that I've really noticed that I cross-reference a lot. Now, and if anything else comes up as I'm putting this together that I've forgotten about, then I'll throw that in too. But those are the three that I frequently see correlate with the beginning of relationships or meeting someone important that will become important to you at some point in your life.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What happens if a client comes in and they're like, when is love coming around for me? And you don't see it for the next 4 or 5 years.
I mean, I've had that happen. So usually in that case, I point to, there's always like smaller and larger scale things you can see.
Correct.
And so if I see smaller scale things in the closer future, I will point to those and say, here's a possibility, but so you can pay attention to this time period and see what comes up. But what I really see as probably more important is this time period. And then we always get into discussions about how long people feel like time is passing because, 5 years. No, I mean, really with clients, sometimes 5 years is like, that's fine. That's pretty soon. And some people are like, oh my God, I'm going to die like before I ever meet someone. So, you have to have that discussion too about like relative expectations.
Very good. All right. So your second lecture on Sunday, May 30th is in fact on zodiacal releasing as a narrative to healing. So what is that second part? So zodiacal releasing as a narrative.
As narrative healing. Yeah.
Yes,
So
narrative healing.
Basically, the idea of narrative healing has become kind of more popular in the last, say, 5 to 10 years, especially. It was popping up before that, but within psychology, within medicine, even so the idea is that it's inherently healing. It's an inherently healing process for us to be able to tell our own stories of our lives. Right. And so this is not going to be like a clinical thing. I am not like a clinical psychologist, but you don't have to be. This is a basic idea. No matter what astrological techniques you're using in anyone's practice, it's still basically a humanistic endeavor, right? You're talking to people about their lives. And so even if you're doing predictive, which I do, I'm still talking to people about their lives. So basically the idea is zodiacal releasing. So I'm going to be using this as a core technique in both of these lectures. Zodiacal releasing, as it has become revived, is mostly known as a predictive technique at this point. And you can certainly use it, and I do use it as a predictive technique. But I think the lesser known, because it's just becoming more popularized again, the lesser known use of it is you can actually use it to look at much longer spans of like narrative arcs in your life. And you can do that with career and general life direction. You can do it with relationships. Some people, it's applicable for health, but I usually use it for the first two. So I don't do this with everyone, but you can, and I have done it with some people, if they really are interested in looking at like the long span of their time. Now, this is often more useful for older clients because they've had longer to think about, more years lived, basically. But yeah, you can talk through the narrative arc of someone's life and, the difference. So we're basically applying the idea of narrative healing in dialogue. We're talking through what's your life story and how does that line up with these different periods? And it's a dialogue. It's always a dialogue when I use it, but it's particularly a dialogue when I'm doing it this way, when I'm talking about long spans of time with people, because you have to say, okay, this is what I see astrologically. What happened? What happened then? And that's, that's like a recurring, like, and then what happened? And then what happened? And, you can talk through these long spans of time. And I've had people, even though it wasn't really like something I was doing purposely, but I've had people, as I've talked through this, be really moved and be like, that's amazing that's lined up so clearly with what I've experienced. Sometimes even more so when people have had hard times, because, it's meaning making. And meaning making makes hard times more bearable or more understandable or more acceptable in our lives. So that's basically what I'm doing with that talk, is showing how you can talk through these longer narrative arcs. And I would say the difference between regular applications of narrative healing in like medicine or in psychology is that there's a little bit more of an idea that you're kind of like making up, like whatever story you make up is fine, as long as it's healing to you, as long as it's meaning making to you. And while I agree with that in general, there's an extra piece here when we use it with astrology or with this technique. And certainly you can use other techniques in astrology this way too. But there's another piece where you're saying this should line up this way. And then that's kind of exciting for many people to see that it does in fact line up that way. So that's what I'm going to be doing with that. As I mentioned, you can use other astrology techniques to do this same kind of talking through, of course, people's life experiences. The main difference with zodiacal releasing is it's the closest I've found in astrology to a linear timeline, because most astrology is cyclical. We're talking about cycles, whether they repeat every 12 years, whether they repeat every 30 years, different cycles. And certainly we don't throw those out. Those are still there, and I bring them in dialogue if they're applicable. But But zodiacal releasing, the time periods on the largest scale are so long. They're anywhere from 8 to 30 years. You won't get through all of them. And so it's essentially more linear. It's like you actually can map like a line of like this. It doesn't really recur except for if you become famous and something happens after your death, which
Right.
sometimes happens. But anyway, for most purposes, it's linear.
Well, I love the narrative healing element. People want to be heard,
Mm-hmm.
which is valuable. When somebody is listening and then showing in this sort of, as you say, linear sort of way that these cycles have lined up with their experience. There's it gives it a larger arc of meaning that it wasn't just my simple little life, or it wasn't just by accident, or I wasn't just a victim, or I wasn't just whatever. That there seems to be a point and purpose to what is happening to my life and in my life. And this gives it context. And in that there is healing. So there's a healing of telling the story. And then there's the healing in seeing it within this framework. So
yes,
bravo.
exactly.
Bravo.
Yeah. And I've been really moved in turn when the people I've been talking with have been moved by this, and, and that it's felt really meaningful for them to see it line up. So that's why I wanted to present this, that this is something that you can actually talk through in this way and use in a more humanistic sense. It doesn't have to be only predictive.
Correct. Well, thank you, Leisa. Thanks for taking the time and sharing some information about your lectures that are coming up for NORWAC. So again, folks, if you want to go on over to norwac.net, you'll find all kinds of information about the conference along with the registration link. So see you again. And
thanks for talking with me
later, Leisa.